I can tell you so many reasons why I love Lou Andreas-Salomé. Not only because she created this freedom that women today demand. She created it herself in an impossible period, at a time when women were not allowed to study philosophy. And she also, you know, was the first woman psychoanalyst. At the age of 50, she decided that the answer to the problems that she had thought were philosophical were psychological. So then, with the encouragement of Freud, she became the first woman analyst. The other thing I loved about her was that she was really a muse. She inspired men. Even if the relationship was difficult or tragic, as it was with Nietzsche because she refused to marry him, he immediately produced a book, Zarathustra. And everybody knew that. They were always so inspired to almost reach their highest self with her, that this was part of her seduction. I mean, aside from being a beautiful woman, there's something always wakened and stirred, and with Rilke, he admitted that very often, that she had set him free of many things, so that he might have remained a minor poet, but for her, she expanded his vision. So she was what we call a muse, and it's terribly interesting to see. At the same time, for her time, she may have seemed inhuman to some men, because she's the one who would announce the end of the relationship, which was not usually done. And she said to Rilke, now the passion is over, the relationship is over, and she ended it, which was very unusual in that time, for the woman to decide when, at what moment the relationship ended. But to me, she is a heroine who didn't wait for the right time, or didn't wait for other women to think as she did, but just went ahead and created her own freedom. She had no guilt. She also had a tremendous rebellious spirit, which made her almost automatically break all the taboos. She felt all the taboos were wrong. The way the marriage was set up, the way the lover relationship was set up, the way philosophy was set up at that time. Religion, she rebelled against religion when she was very young. That's why I consider her a contemporary heroine. And of course there are other women that I love too. I don't know if you know Leslie Blanch's Wilder Shores of Love. The 4 English women who decided to turn their backs on their culture and integrate themselves into the life of the East. And one was, of course, Mrs. Richard Burton. The other was Lady Digby, who married an Arab and led a perfectly Arab wife's life. She was a great horsewoman. She learned even to raid tourist parties. She lived exactly according to her husband's beliefs, washed his feet when he came back from the desert, and was a very beautiful woman up to the age of 70 when she died. Then there was another remarkable Russian girl who ran away from her immigrant life in southern France, emigrated Russians, and lived as a boy with the Arabs, and was a friend of Lyoté, and was considered a link between the Arabs and the French, and they trusted her to exchange messages and understanding. And the Arabs respected her anonymity so much they knew she was a woman, but they never let on to it. And she dressed as a boy, went on the caravans, and died. The astrology announced her death. And there's one case in which they proved themselves right. They said she would die drowned in the desert. And she did die at the age of 24 in the flash flood in the desert. And left a diary, which has not been translated into English either. Oh, there was a 4th one. The 4th one was the cousin of Josephine, the Empress Josephine, and she was stolen by the Turks and put in a harem, and from the harem she caused a revolution in Turkey. So these women show that you can do that anywhere, at any time, any place. Thérèse Crosby, the mouvement perpétuel due to her saying yes to all life, Caresse still saying yes.
Yes and never no was our answer to the fabulous 20s and 30s. Emmeline Epting seized on the idea of making a film. I always say yes, and so I said yes to Emmeline when he wanted me to be Passion Plus in his movie called Poem 8.
I love Caresse's Women Against War, the citizens of the world idea. She created her world passport and flew a one-world flag from her castle in Italy.
My idea is to create here an atmosphere where the poet and the philosopher and the artist can really give ideas that can lead the world to peace and sanity. I believe really that the national unit is outmoded and that the politician can lead us nowhere. That we need men of ideas and men of vision and men of compassion.
I'm in the midst of working on Volume 5. It brings in all kinds of different themes from all the others. I mean, there is never the same experiences. Volume 5 includes taking LSD for a period of 8 hours, I think, or it lasted even 12 hours. I was invited to do it as an experiment by a Dr. Oscar Jeniger, who wanted to have a musician, a scientist, and a writer. He thought the writer would be better able to tell what it was like. And I wanted to see, I was very curious to see whether there was a world that only the LSD could give me, that I had never penetrated. I'm always curious about an unknown world. So the memory of the LSD is very clear, and I wrote the whole thing out, a long reverie. And then I compared it to see if the images brought on by LSD were similar to images and sensations and impressions I had already described, and I found them in the work. Particularly in the first book I wrote, which was a prose poem, House of Incest, which was made up of dreams, of course. So the material was so like what was brought on by LSD that it proved my point that this is a world that's accessible to the poet, accessible to the artist, and that if we hadn't really belittled the poet so much and the artist so much, we wouldn't have needed the alchemy or the drug to reach those visions. And one of the most marvelous states, which is almost undescribable and probably only happened to mystics, was turning into gold. Suddenly I myself became gold. And it was a sensation I've never yet been able to describe, except compared to making love, probably. That's one of the themes of Volume 5. And then, of course, continues the struggle of the woman trying to remain a woman and yet trying to be an artist, too. My whole effort in my work, in my life, was to return and reconstruct these bridges that had been violently cut. And, of course, as the diaries develop, and particularly now I can see this is a volume that precedes the one which everything opened out into the world, and suddenly the world answers the writer, and he's not alone anymore, and it's not a solitary chant anymore, it becomes a universal. It happened when, as soon as I was able to share the diary, and I was really very much afraid to do that and be, as we all fear, not loved or judged. When I overcame that fear and finally did publish them, then I found myself in complete communion almost with a whole world of people I didn't even know existed, who were revealed to me by their letters, who send me their diaries, who really, when they write me, want to be as present, say, as a friend who will come and talk about their life. They feel immediately on a footing of friendship and sharing. They feel that they owe me that too, for me to know them in a deep way. So the last few years have been extraordinary, and I think it fulfills the dream of every artist really is to contact the world and also to rebuild these bridges so that other people also realize that they don't have to be isolated, they don't have to be in what I call the solitary chamber of the neurotic. So the passageways I've tracked down through many ways. One was, of course, accepting the dream as a very eloquent expression of our secret self, which became a very important part of my life and my work. Very often my novels start with a description of a dream. The other was really portraying people and trying to portray them so deeply that you went beyond judgment. You don't pass judgment as you portray. You try to find the motivation for everything they do, which means acceptance. And this must have been